Just click on continue, everybody, okay? Don't click on leave meeting. Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. So I'm excited for all of you to be here. And our first session of Camp Gleneagles. And we have Niki Sepsas. He is our tour guide, our counselor, whatever whatever you like to call him. He is here tonight to talk to you about traveling abroad. Right now, he's going to give you the history from the Shetlands to Scilly and some of the Britain's unsung treasures. So I don't know if you did any research on this beautiful land, but I certainly did. And please keep yourself muted. If you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. Afterwards, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So thank you, Niki, for joining us again. You can share your screen too.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Tammy. It's a pleasure to be with you and the guests at Gleneagles. Happy to talk to you tonight about what is one of my favorite places to visit, and this is in the British Isles. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have visited the British Isles, and there's a standard tour that will show you some of the sites that are most popular. Tonight, we're going to deviate. We're going to take the road less traveled. We're going to begin in the British Isles and see some of these, what really are unsung treasures that are easily accessible for people who want to get there, but they're unknown to many of the travelers from the United States, unless you have some kind of heads up on what they are, why they're so important historically, the scenic beauty that you're going to see, and the culture that we will experience. Now, here's where we're going to begin in the British Isles over here. Those are matter of fact, the three largest islands in Europe are the United Kingdom.
Niki, you forgot again to share your screen.
I'm sorry?
You have to share your screen again. That's perfect. And then just, yeah, enlarge.
Great, now we're back up, right? Okay, sharing screen, looking at the British Isles. Over here on the right, the United Kingdom, and on the left is the island of Ireland. The 6 counties in the north are part of the United Kingdom, and the 26 counties in the south are the Republic of Ireland. Now, if you've done the British Isles, most of the programs, whether you're traveling by land or cruising, you'll start in London, and of course there's the Tower of London right there on the River Thames, the mighty fortress built by William the Conqueror after he conquered the Anglo-Saxons at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. We also visited Buckingham Palace, one of the residents, I'll say one of the residents, there's about 6 of them that the Queen and the royal family share in Scotland and in England. Of course, we also visited St. Paul's Cathedral. We'll go many times to Westminster. There is where the British Parliament meets. And on the right, you see the famous clock. Now, it's called Big Ben, but Big Ben is only the clock itself. The tower is called St. Stephen's Clock Tower. It houses that great clock there on the Thames River. We also visited Westminster Abbey, of course, the resting place of kings and queens and about 300 famous people from Winston Churchill on the centuries, right there at Westminster Abbey. Dates from a little abbey in the 10th century. And if you go a little bit further afield, of course, the great Stonehenge, the mystery of the Druids. Why did these people cut and quarry these stones, drag them for miles, and set them in a certain pattern here in the area around Stonehenge? We visit Scotland, of course. You do Edinburgh, the capital, with its mighty castle overlooking the city. We look at the River Forth and a great monument to William Wallace, the great victory over the English army, right there at the River Forth at Stirling Bridge. Also a monument in Edinburgh to one of the great poets, Robert Burns. And then the beautiful castles of Scotland. Those are usually always on the travel itinerary. Going into Ireland, you see one of the most beautiful capital cities in England. They're out the British Isles there when the weather is right. They're downtown Dublin. We look at the River Liffey, where it was founded by the Vikings in the 10th century. All of the great castles, including Blarney Castle, where you get a chance to kiss the Stone of Eloquence. Get the gift of gab, kissing the Blarney Castle stone. Ireland claims to have 36 different shades of green, and that's probably hard to debate with them. The beautiful green that you see all around there, they certainly have the great sea cliffs running right down to the ocean, the sheer cliffs of 600, 800, even 1,000 feet high. And then if you're lucky to stay in one of the beautiful and charming little bed and breakfasts that are so popular throughout Ireland. Well, as I said, we're going to deviate from those standard sites today. We're going to start, of course, in London, and we're going all the way down here to the southernmost part of the United Kingdom, the Isles of Scilly, S-C-I-L-L-Y. Kind of interesting name. The Brits like to say that anything further south, it'd be Scilly. Well, this is S-C-I-L-L-Y. We look at those 5 islands and how important they are as a tourist attraction. And then we'll be in the inner and the outer Hebrides, up here, the island of Mull, north and Stornoway, the island of Lewis and Harris. And a little bit farther north, we're going to be all the way in the northernmost part of the United Kingdom, the Shetland Islands up here, and just south of them, we'll see the Orkney Islands. Again, a little bit off the beaten track, but you'll see how important and how incredibly beautiful they are. We're going to start down here in Scilly. And there, again, right in the Celtic Sea, we have about 24 little islands, but only 5 of them are really inhabited and will figure into our story. There's St. Mary's, which is the large one, big town of Hewtown, which is the largest. Up in the north is St. Martin's, over here is Tresco, Briar, and then the southernmost is St. Agnes. Now the entire area of those 5 islands is just a little bit over 6 square miles. You see how very small it is. And when you look at it from space, that's what you see. Just a scattering of little islands there, the 5 major ones, and then others are just mostly little rocks out in the Celtic Sea. Now, it was a larger area in ancient times. Why was it larger? Well, the island itself had a lot more land area, but there were the great sheets of ice that covered the earth at that time. As the earth warmed over the centuries, those sheets of ice melted, the sea levels rose. So about 1,600 and 1,500 years ago, the sea levels would rise to the point where these are the only ones that are right now poking their heads above the surface of the sea. Now, were these islands visited by the ancient Phoenicians and the Romans? Well, certainly it appears that they were. These were great seafaring people at the time. And it looks like that they went all the way across the Mediterranean out into the Atlantic Ocean and up into the British Isles. They were certainly visited by the Norwegians. In the 10th, 11th, and the 12th century, the people in what is now Denmark and Norway left their homes, and many of them ventured out onto the Atlantic Ocean. Many of the settlements in Ireland and in England were original settlements by the Vikings. And they visited down here. The great-grandson of the very first Norwegian king, this man's name was Olaf Tryggvason, in 986 visited the island. He wasn't in conquest, he was looking for settlement. He visited a seer here, a man who was predicting the future, and the man told him, you will become a renowned king one day, and he did. Olaf I would be his name, of Norway. We see a number of people over the years would settle. The Norwegians came, the raiders that they were eventually, and then the settlers that they became. Many of the cities in Ireland, for example, Waterford and Dublin, and over in England, looking at many of those settlements along the rivers where the Norwegians, the Vikings there had settled after they were the great conquerors. You'll see a number of flags flying over the Scilly Islands. Of course, there's the flag of Great Britain. It is part of the United Kingdom. There's the Union Jack. And there's an interesting flag that's the County of Cornwall. This is called St. Piran's Cross, the Cross of St. Piran. It's called the Scillonian Cross because it is flown there in the Scilly Islands. St. Piran, of course, the patron saint of the area, also has his cross on the actual flag of the Scilly Islands. There, the orange is supposed to represent the beautiful sunsets. The blue represents the ocean. And then the 5 stars in the right-hand corner are the 5 main islands of Scilly. Now, the population of that 6 square miles is only about 2,300 people, and almost half of them live in the largest city in Hewtown, right there on St. Mary's. Population just last year of over almost 1,100 people. Now, it is only about 40 kilometers, about 24 miles from the southernmost point of England. When you look at St. Mary's and there in St. Agnes down there to the south, there is ferry service from St. Mary's. It takes you up there to Penzance. If you were to connect with the southernmost point of England, which is the lizard right there, you'd see a distance of about 40 kilometers. Again, that's about 24 miles. Very short run down to the Scilly Islands. Very popular with yachtsmen. And when you look at this photograph, you think, whoa, Niki, this looks like the Bahamas or somewhere in the Caribbean. Is this actually what the Scilly Islands look like? You don't think of that in the British Isles with the clouds and the rain and the stormy weather that they have. You look around and say, my goodness, this does look like a Caribbean island. This crystal clear water, the low areas there, no mountains that you see, this swaying seagrass, the beautiful sand dunes, and the beautiful beaches. Well, this is what you find when you visit the Scilly Islands because of the Gulf Stream. This is that great river in the Atlantic Ocean. It flows along the eastern shores of North America, and then the North Atlantic Drift takes it up into the British Isles. And that is very warm water. That's why you see the red over there in the British Isles keeps it quite warm water. When I was working on the oil drilling rigs up there in the North Sea, we were able to drill year round in those waters, the Norwegian Sea and the North Sea, because the water was warm. Look at the corresponding area to the left, the Labrador Current, icy cold, where that area freezes over at the same latitudes. So you have this wonderful weather, the beautiful clear water. May is the prime time for visiting there. They get more sunlight there than they get any other time of year. Almost a full day, 7 hours of sunshine they had last month. And the average annual temperature at 53 degrees is certainly better than what you find in London and some of the cities to the north. It's very popular with honeymoon couples and couples that want to get married right there on the Scilly Isles. Here, best time to go is May. Other time is good, but you might be hearing the umbrella when you have your nuptial vows exchanged at other times. Is it a vacation playground? It certainly is. Yachtsmen love to enjoy the waters there. Travelers are coming today, and it's about 85% of the gross domestic product of the Scilly Isles is from tourism. They're very proud of the fact. A lot of water sports, well, you're going to be some chilly water. You're still going to wear a wetsuit, but they have some surfing. They have very popular windsurfing area. People carry all their gear and ride the beautiful currents and the wind around the islands. It's very popular also with kayakers. Many of the beaches are great for exploring after you pull your kayak ashore. Great Britain has the same thing that we have with a little different name. Our national parks and national scenic areas over there are called Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. And in 1975, the Scilly Islands received that from Parliament. It's very popular with many creatures in the water as well. These are sea lions. These are so much fun to watch, and National Geographic has done a lot of work with these creatures above and below the water. Perfectly at home there with the little sea urchins and cruising around. This is a National Geographic photographer nose to nose with one of these sea lions enjoying his little kelp bed. Very popular in the Scilly Isles. Now the tidal range is perfect for people who like to go beachcombing. You have an almost 20-foot in tidal difference between high tide and low tide. That's a pretty spectacular area. So people love to go there and find all the little treasures that the ocean washes up in that area. You go from where we are in St. Mary's south to St. Agnes. Now, you're not going to find much in these other islands. You do find the reason people go there, and here is to see rocks. Why rocks? Well, it's like going to Stonehenge in England. The Neolithic people were very superstitious, and they had their own religion as well. And they arranged many of these rock formations as part of their spiritual life. One of the most popular, like we have the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy, they have the Old Man of Guff here in St. Agnes and the Scilly Isles. When will this topple over? Well, it probably will in the future. Up in the north, we will find Briar. Briar is even less populated than it is down in St. Agnes. Most of the people live right around the settlement that's called Hell, but this doesn't look like Hell to me. That looks like a very nice photograph of a very picturesque pastoral area. Only a handful of people living there, and they cater to the few tourists who come with their sailboats to find these out-of-the-way places. Now, since it is so sparsely populated and they do have these wonderful sea cliffs, it is a perfect area for seabirds. Many, many species of birds, including this guy. This is one of my favorite here. This is a puffin. There's 3 species of puffins. The one over here that we're seeing is the Atlantic puffin. The ones over in Alaska, matter of fact, the people there call them Eskimo chickens. They're about the size of a chicken, pretty ungainly on the land, but they're beautifully marked with their beaks, perfect for holding the little fish that they fish out of the water, and that's their diet. They're pretty much at home in these sea cliffs because they're protected there from any predators. Now we'll go over here to Tresco, one again of the least populated, and what we find there is the Yachtsman's Haven. New Grimsby Sound is one of the few places there where you can get a hotel room and find what they need to resupply all of the sailboats that are visiting in the area. The northernmost one up here is St. Martin's. They have ferry service up here, and there people love to take their hikes. It's one of the larger islands. They have a little trail that takes you up to the lighthouse there, St. Martin's. Going back down here to spend some more time at the most populous here. Half of the population, half of the 2,300 people live right there in Hughtown. Now there they're looking at Neolithic settlements also. The people here had built these rock settlements. This was called Giant's Castle. Big, huge stones that were part of a fortification there. And there at Patalik Cove, it's what they're celebrating, well, I should say commemorating what happened in 1707. What happened? A huge storm shipwrecked the British fleet that was coming back. 21 ships in the Armada, 6 of them were lost. We see over 1,400 of the British sailors who died in that great tragedy right there off of St. Martin's. There is a marker there to commemorate the loss of life for those people. It's also the home of where the body of the admiral leading that group, Admiral Shovel, washed up ashore. They have his monument right there to commemorate his service. And then it's the spot where the man who brought us the telegraph, Guglielmo Marconi, in 1898, just before the turn of the century, sent a telegraph message there, wireless signal. It would later be transferred across the Atlantic to Newfoundland. So they marked Guglielmo Marconi there. This is Hughtown, very beautiful little area. And what you'll see in nearly all of the areas we're going to visit is how colorful these little ports are. In the wintertime, it's dark there at the northern latitudes. It's pretty cold and drizzly rain, so they brighten it up, especially here at the harbor. During the summer months, when the tourists are there, they're very, very happy to welcome them with all of the color, from the beaches and the flowers to the little boats, and even the houses splashing whatever color and paint they have left over from the boats right onto their houses. Now, it's surprising to find a very good maritime museum right here on the island. Hughtown Museum has some great bits of memorabilia from those who like to follow the maritime history of not just the area here, but all of the British Isles. So you have a look at the sunset there, and you see the church, which is the focal point of the town, the little schoolhouse, and beautiful houses right around the harbor. Now, you would not expect to find grapes growing there, but they do have a vineyard, Holy Vale Vineyard. And the man is very proud of the different wines that he produces there. There's a red and there is a white that he's very happy to show tourists when we take our groups there to have sample some of his wine. Star Castle, after 1588, with the great defeat of the Spanish Armada by the British, they built a series of forts. And this is one that was built 5 years after that great victory by the British over the Spanish. Today it's become a very popular hotel, Star Castle Hotel, 400 years old. They have some flaming sunsets, especially wonderful in the summer months when you do have the long, long periods of daylight. Now we're going to go to the Hebrides. There are the Inner Hebrides and the Outer Hebrides. They're part of Scotland. Why would anyone visit these remote little islands? Well, where we're going to visit is one of the most popular, and it is the second largest of all of them, the island of Mull. Many people have never heard of it, but when you take them there, they don't want to leave. It's just south of the high point of the Highlands there, Ben Nevis, the high point of Scotland at 1,344 meters. There is the island of Mull. Just off coast there, has ferry service to the other islands. Now you'll see the different flags. That is the flag of Scotland, and that is the royal flag, the national flag and the royal flag. Scotland was its own independent kingdom until 1777, when they became part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Still people voting today, very soon, about whether they want to take out of the United Kingdom and become the independent country again. 338 square miles. We just saw 6 square miles down in the Scilly Islands. You see how much larger this island is. Even so, it's only about twice the population that we saw down in Hughtown. Almost 3,000 people live around the island. We're going to be visiting Tobermory. That's the most visited site there. It would be maybe the capital, you want, so to speak, largest city, and the spot where the cruise ships will go in. And that's where ferry service takes you to these other remote islands that are very close by. No reason to really visit them. You'll see so much you want there, and this beautiful scenery in the loch here. L-O-C-H in the Scottish is lake. L-O-G-U-E in the Irish, the Celtic, is lake. But here is Loch Kinneil, National Scenic Area, because of the great beauty. Part of that beauty are the rock formations. Now, archaeologists love to study this area, and we take our tour groups there to see what is so special about rocks. Well, this is basalt rock. What happened when these islands were formed in the volcanic eruptions that took place millennia ago, the hot molten lava from the interior of the earth spilled over, and the cool temperatures when it surfaced caused them to almost form these beautiful rock formations. It looks like it's just dripping down, and that's where the lava cooled very quickly and formed these basalt columns. This is very popular also with people who love to climb. This is very good climbing rock. It's volcanic rock. It doesn't crumble in your hands. This is one of our little tour boats to take you out there for a look at the birds that are nesting in these basalt columns. There at Lac Vieux, we see some more of these Bronze Age, Iron Age people. Why did they put these stones in these certain patterns? And they carried them for many, many miles from where they quarried them. Again, it's one of the mysteries that we'll never get the answers to because these people left no written history. We do find the archaeologists have brought to life some of what these people made during the Iron Age. And it was visited by Saint Columba. Who was Saint Columba? Ireland is one of the few countries that has more than one patron. Ireland has 3 patron saints. Of course, everyone knows St. Patrick, whose feast day is March the 17th, but St. Columba and St. Bridget of Kildare were the 2 other patron saints of Ireland. Now, when St. Patrick brought Christianity back to Ireland, St. Columba would join him in the 6th century in preaching the gospel, baptizing the people there who became Christians. It would be the settlement again of the Viking people. Norsemen, Magnus Barefoot, what a great name, Magnus the Barefoot. During the 200 years of the Vikings who established their settlements there and left their imprint, many of these people traced their lineage all the way back to the Viking days. They left many of their signs with the different castles that they had built. They're in ruins today, like Aros Castle, Artornish Castle. Most of these were along the lakes and along the coastal areas, so the Vikings could control them very easily. This is one of the most visited. The Clan MacLean built Duart Castle, and it is one of the best preserved. It goes back there to the MacLean clan. The Moy Castle, one is just in ruins now, but again, it has some beautiful views all around it. What we see also is one of the newer ones. This dates only to the 19th century, Torosay. Many of these now are open where tourists can overnight. You get a bed and breakfast and you have your overnight stay in these famous castles. Now, people who love birds don't want to leave this area. 261 species of birds, including some of the largest raptors that we find anywhere. Let's start with the biggest one. This is the white-tailed eagle. Of course, we're familiar with the bald eagle of the United States, has the beautiful feathers white around its head. This one, the tail feathers are white. In the Gaelic name, eagle of the sun's eye, and it has that beautiful fierce eye of the eagle and the long talon. Look at the talons on that eagle. They're about 3 inches long, which is as long as those of the grizzly bear. The guy is a great hunter, and look at the distribution all the way from over here in the northern part of Scotland, over here where we are in the Hebrides, all the way across Russia, down to Southeast Asia, even in the boot of Arabia, the Indian subcontinent and throughout Northern Europe, we find this beautiful bird. Ranks 4th largest. There is the sea eagle, the one that we're looking at here, and here is our national bird. You see the difference in the coloring of the head and of the feathers, the tail. A little bit larger than the one on the left, but still it's great to see them. The guy weighs maybe 9, 10, as much as even 15 pounds. So when you're that big, you need a tremendous wingspan, and that is exactly what this eagle has. 6, 7, and even 8 feet are needed for him to get airborne when you're that heavy. The juvenile, great to watch them because they like to joust. Here what they're doing is kind of sparring with each other. This one at the supreme position up there, he's the dominant one. They're using their talons to kind of claw at each other's talons. They also have the golden eagle. We have these also in Alaska, again with a fierce eye, but doesn't have that beautiful white head. Now it does have something that others do not have. Look at all the feathers along the feet of that eagle. Why would he be so covered in feathers, the golden eagle? It's because this guy likes to go to altitude, and many of those places will have snow in the wintertime. You get down to 2,000 and 3,000 feet above sea level, they do have snowfall. So Mother Nature has equipped the golden eagle with these feathers along his feet. Here, this golden eagle is going after some prey here, going after some smaller birds. He doesn't make many mistakes. With those long talons, this guy loves to fish. He'll swoop down, extend those talons, grabs his prey, and off he goes. This is a female going back to feed her babies. We'll follow them to find where they live, and it's easy to see their nest because they're about as big as the back of a pickup truck. There's the nest of a sea eagle up in the treetops. Got a picture of him looking down at them. Now, this is another bird that's very popular in the Hebrides, the short-eared owl. Where are his ears? How short are they? Well, he does have some ears, but they're very hard to see. They'll pick him up there. He's got very good hearing, and with those huge eyes, they're nocturnal, so they do most of their hunting at night. He only weighs about a pound. See how small that is. We looked at eagle at going up to 9, 10, and 12 pounds. This guy weighs about 1 pound. He has a relative that looked kind of startled here. They're the long-eared. You can see why they call him the long-eared owl. Looks like a bunny rabbit. And then this guy. This is the largest of all of them, the great horned owl. Now, Mother Nature has equipped them with perfect camouflage. You don't see them, but you do find them the most widely distributed owl anywhere in the world, the short-eared owl that we find up here in the Hebrides, on all the continents except for Australia. 10 of these subspecies, but they didn't develop down here in Australia. Look at the camouflage. You're really pressed to find the bird in that picture. You look at it from a distance, of course, he's not seen by any of the creatures that he's going to prey on. The wingspan may be 3 feet, at the most 4 feet, because he is very small. Doesn't need that much of a lift to get airborne. But it's great to see these birds and to hear them when we're in the Hebrides. Watch them soaring, moving, mostly at night, but many times you see them over here on the sea cliffs where they're picking off sometimes the small birds and the eggs of these birds that nest in those cliffs. The last one I'm going to show you is this hawk. This is not the fastest. There is a Peregrine Falcon that is faster than this guy, but he is one of the fastest of the predators. He just bombs his prey right out of the sky. And he's called, in the scientific language, Circus cyanus. They take circus from the Greek word kyklos, meaning circle, and then cyanus. Why blue? I don't know. He didn't have any kind of a blue, it appears to me, more of a green when you look at them. We'll also find some snakes and some amphibians in these areas, even with some crickets. Now, these were all visitors. They came with ships over here to the Hebrides. You don't have these normally associated in island areas. We do find these guys. These were the only land mammals that were natives up here in the Hebrides. That's the marine otter up here in the top picture, and the red deer, which is the national animal of Scotland in the south. We do find a lot of whales. These are very popular feeding grounds for the whales. This is the minke. This is part of the finback whale family that are the second largest of these type of whales. And there's a lot of, these are great to watch, these bottlenose dolphins. They love to run in the spray of our cruise ships as they follow us along. Now, just as we saw that great museum down in Hewtown, there is a wonderful aquarium here on the island of Mull. Again, you wouldn't expect to see something that spectacular in a very small area. There's Tobermory, population of 1,000, again, about the size of Hewtown. Their lighthouse in the back, what you see is one of the ferry boats that makes easy connections here with the other of the islands here in Scilly and to the mainland of England. Harbor of Tobermory, again, with the wonderful colors that you find everywhere. Brighten it up. And then this man, we've never heard of him. I had never heard of Admiral Gilbert Stevenson, but he was known as the Terror of Tobermory. He was very, very strict disciplinarian. Now, the interesting thing to me when I first saw this picture, if any of you were fans of the television series MASH, a great TV show that ran for so many years, you might remember this man. That was the colonel who was the head of the MASH unit. His name was Harry Morgan. To me, when I saw the picture of the Terror of Tobermory, I said, that is the spitting image of Harry Morgan. A little bit of useless trivia there, but shows what this man is known for. They're also known for a very popular Scotch whiskey that is distilled here. This is one of the many Scotch single malt whiskeys. I asked the Scotsman there, I said, what about the ones that we have in the US? He said, we just export that stuff. He said, we keep the best over here for ourselves. And the Tobermory one right here in the Scilly Isles, in the Hebrides, is one that is the most popular. We have tours to take you through there to see how the peat moss that gives the Scots whiskey that distinctive taste. And then you may not have heard the Macquarie name unless you visited in Australia. This is the family mausoleum of the Macquarie family. Lachlan Macquarie, a Scotsman, was the very first of the governors that the British sent down to what was a penal colony in Australia, governor of New South Wales in the early part of the 19th century. If you like to hit golf balls, you can go just above the town there for the Tobermory Golf Course. How many people have played golf there? One of the most remote golf courses that you will find. They're known also for the beautiful sea cliffs. This is, again, from the volcanic activity and the glaciers that sculpted this beautiful area and left for some of the most beautiful scenery that we find anywhere in the British Isles. We visit the Inner Hebrides. Let's go to the Outer Hebrides. A little bit more severe weather out here because they are facing the great Atlantic Ocean and the fierce storms that come out of the North Sea. We're going to be up here in the north. This is interesting. An island that has two names, Lewis and Harris. Well, they say it's up here, one island, but it has the two names. When you look at the northern part of what's called the Isle of Lewis, and you look at the southern part, which is still part of Lewis, but they call it Harris, sometimes called South Harris. One island, two names, two very distinct topography. In the north, it's very, very flat, where we find some rolling hills and a lot of mountains there in the southern part, in Harris. This is what makes it such a popular area. This is An Clishan. This is what they call one of their Corbett's. Now, what is a Corbett? Well, in Scotland, they have a series of mountains that they name according to their height. If the mountain is between 2,500 and 3,000 feet above sea level, they call it a Corbett. This one just qualifies. It's just a half-mile high, 2,600 feet, which means it gets some pretty good snowfall in the winter months. Now, there are 222 of these Corbetts in Scotland. This is Goat Fell. This is another very popular one. And there's a group of people that call themselves the Corbetteers. What they try to do is to hike up to the top of all 222 of these Corbetts in Scotland. Now, there are two of them over here on the island of Harris. Over here, we see Clisham and Ben. Ben, again, is noting to a mountain. Now, there's also what the Scots have is a Maryland. We saw what a Corbett is. What is a Maryland? A Maryland is much lower. If you're between 150 feet above elevation, all the way up to a Corbett, you are a Maryland. I have never found how they named it Maryland. Now, Ben Nevis is a Maryland. That is the high point in Scotland. It's a great hike, but it's difficult because of the weather. It's shrouded just about 300 days out of the year by the clouds. Now, one of the most popular attractions over here in the Outer Hebrides are the stones, just like we see in England in Stonehenge. These are Neolithic monuments by people who had a very pronounced religion. They're very spiritual. And the stones of Kalaniche is what they arranged in a certain pattern for the worship of their gods. And their gods were nature all around them. They have them sometimes in circles like these, other times the great standing stones, like we'll see later on up there in the islands in the Orkney. Now, this is also something that's very surprising and very popular to people who visit the Hebrides. Why do they have so many carnivorous plants? These are plants that don't get their nourishment from the soil and the sunlight. They eat different insects. That sundew on the left opens up. The beautiful smell attracts insects. It closes around the insect, like the pitcher plants as well. It traps the insect, and later it will consume them. A lot of them right there in the Hebrides. Because the weather is so bad, the storms are so bad, the Coast Guard, Her Majesty's Coast Guard, does some yeoman's work up there for the rescue it does for different ships, commercial vessels, and the private yachts in the area. It's also very popular for one of the most famous tweeds of Scotland. Now, crofters are the people who weave this. This is the one that we find in Harris tweed, and for it to get that name, it has to meet several criteria as defined by the British Parliament. It's just like we see in Greece, where you have what we used to have, feta cheese could be made anywhere in the world. Now it has to be a certain amount of goat's milk and sheep's milk from Greece. We have the same thing in Champagne. It has to be from that Champagne region of France. We have the Dijon mustard, only from Dijon. The Harris tweed up here in these islands is hand woven by the islanders at their homes in the Outer Hebrides, finished in those islands, and then made into pure virgin wool, dyed and spun right here in the Hebrides. These people weren't part of the Industrial Revolution. They went into the big machinery. They did still the home type spinning. And here they're called the crofters. Here's a croft village on the Isle of Lewis, all still handmade right there. Isle of Lewis is famous for Stornoway. There is the spot that we visit, usually with our tour groups and certainly with the cruise ships. And it is one of the largest places we will see on our tour today. 8,000 people, largest of all of them out here in the Hebrides. Now, a great tragedy took place here just a few months after World War I ended. Of course, the fighting ended in November the 11th of 1918. Just a couple months later, His Majesty's ship, the Illair, was on its way home, and it was almost home. Right here, it encountered a violent storm in the Hebrides, and it was lost with 208 of the naval people on board. And that's such a great tragedy. These guys had survived World War I, all of the horror of World War I, and there they are just a days out of home, and they drowned in this ship's tragedy right there in sight of their home. It's also home to this man. Who was Alexander Mackenzie? Why is he important? You probably remember the name of Lewis and Clark, the great explorers who left St. Louis in 1804 and made their way all the way to the unexplored interior of the country, crossed the Rocky Mountains, made their way to the Pacific Ocean, and came back. Alexander Mackenzie did the same thing before Lewis and Clark. Only he left from over here in Montreal in Canada, made his way all the way across Canada to what is now the area around Vancouver. So Mackenzie and the Mackenzie family, famous in this area of the Hebrides. It's also famous for being the home of this lady. I bet there's some puzzle faces in the audience. Who is she? Why is she important? You probably don't recognize her unless you're a big fan of the Hebrides Islands, but I'm sure you recognize her very popular son. Yes, she was the mother of President, and here he is here with his mother, Mary Ann McLeod. Before she became Mary Ann Trump, immigrated with her family from the Hebrides. She married his father there in New York, and that is where Donald Trump was born. Mary Ann McLeod from over here in Stornoway. There's also a number of castles. Again, one of the real treats is to spend the night in some of these castles in the bed and breakfast and to have a look at their World War I memorial. Over 800,000 Brits would die during World War I, and they're very honored today in the memorials here right across the little harbor of the town. Now we're going to the northernmost point of our visit, up here in the Shetland Islands with some of the most incredible scenery anywhere in Great Britain. You see a collection of islands here that stretch from Lerwick, is there the capital of the islands, all the way up to the very top. Now these were products of great undersea landslides breaking off of an area about the size of Iceland that slid into the ocean. They were inundated then by the tsunamis after these great undersea volcanoes erupted. And that's what's responsible for some of the incredible scenery that we find there. Now you still see so much of that geologic activity and the great cliffs. Again, Hawaii is known for its sea cliffs. These are every bit as dramatic as the sea cliffs of the islands of Hawaii, and very, very popular nesting areas with these birds. There have been humans there for over 5,000 years, but look where they lived, underground. If you look at the landscape, you don't see any trees up here in the Shetlands. Trees were gone hundreds of years ago. So these people learned you live underground, perfect bit of settlements for these little prehistoric sites. There's many of them there that attract geologists, archaeologists, and tourists who visit and see what these people lived like 5,000 years ago. Now this is perfect insulation. They had a very advanced social structure here, and they had their entire, like hobbits, they're living underground. And we know that at the height of Rome's power, all the way from Jerusalem westward to Britannia and to Spain, the Romans conquered everybody. They never, as you see, went north into Scotland. These were the fiercest fighters that the Roman legions found. They call them a barbaric, brutal, and fierce people. What they did was just build a couple of walls. They had the great wall of Antonine. You stay over there, we'll stay over here. So the Roman legions never conquered these people. That's how fierce the fighters they were. World War II, they were known for the great Shetland bus. Now, what was happening here? Well, after the fall of Poland, with the August and September of 1939, We would see Norway fall in 1940 and then Denmark. Well, the Shetland Islands became very popular staging areas for the ships that would come across this very stormy North Sea to supply the Norwegian guerrilla fighters who were the underground. They were fighting the occupying forces of Hitler's troops. They had some yeoman's work that this man did. He was the head of the Shetland bus, and there's a monument to them there in the Shetland Islands. Now, when you look at the incredible work that they did in the stormy waters that they were working, some of the worst water in the world, carrying men, supplies, refugees, supplying intelligence to these freedom fighters. One of the men that's most popular here, and the great Leif Larson, they call him Shetlands Larson because he made 52 trips. And look at the water that he went in. This is a pretty normal day. And this is a cruise ship of 30,000 tons. They were in little 600-ton fishing vessels. This is a pretty decent day, only about a 6-foot sea right here in that ocean. Now look at what a bad day looks like. This is a 30 and 40-foot seas that we were in. They closed off the outside decks to our ship because we had driving rain, we had a 50-knot wind, and we had 30 and 40-foot seas out here. Can you imagine these guys in the tiny little fishing boats trying to go across that bit of stormy water to supply the Norwegian freedom fighters? In fact, one lady I was watching this show last week, she said, will you please go ahead and change that slide? I'm getting seasick just looking at it. We'll look at Lerwick, which is the capital of the Shetlands. It is the northernmost of the Shetland Islands, northernmost town in Scotland. Now, there are other settlements that don't rank as towns, and it is the easternmost at the same time in all of Scotland. It is beautiful, but it doesn't have the great color that we saw in the other little settlements in Scilly and in the Hebrides. These are pretty much drab, brown stone buildings. And look what you see right in the harbor where our cruise ships will bring our tender boats where we come ashore. It's a little Viking vessel. Again, these were some of the very earliest settlements of the Vikings. And that's why they have the premier festival in Lerwick. This is called their Mardi Gras of the North. The whole town turns out for the little festival called Uphilia. It's taking place in the middle of winter, the last Tuesday, every January. The people dress up in Viking costume. There's a great parade through town all day long. And then at night, what they do is they journey to that little boat. And for 364 days, the people in town have been building that vessel and they light it on fire. Great tribute to their Viking heritage. They have their craft people as well. Use the museum that shows what these weavers were doing and still doing up here in the Shetland Islands. You've heard about the Shetland Ponies, not a more beautiful little pony anywhere in the world, perfectly adapted for the very harsh winters that these guys survive in up there. And when they have the beautiful spring with the flowers, there's mom and her little baby. How about from the Shetland Islands, we're going to end our last stop down here in the Orkney Islands. Now, there is ferry service up here to the Orkney Islands, again, across some very stormy sea. Mainland is the largest of the 70 islands. Less than a third of them are actually inhabited. And Kirkwall is the capital right there in the center. They have a flag that looks very similar to the Norwegian flag. That is their island flag, and it's very close to what the Norwegians have, again, because of their Viking heritage, just like we saw in the Shetlands. Kirkwall, Kirk in the Norwegian language is church. So there is the largest city in all of these islands up here, 10,000 people in Church Bay. Right there at the harbor is where the ferry boats come, where the cruise ship tenders will bring us ashore in their little small boats, and where the private yachts are. And there is the Cathedral of St. Magnus. Now, this is the northernmost cathedral in the British Isles. It has cathedral status today. It dates from the 12th century, where St. Magnus was martyred up here in these islands. Beautiful area, again, seeing the outside, but from the 11th century, they would spend the next 300 years working on this cathedral to what you see today. It's not really spectacular inside. It doesn't have the great drama that you see in some of these other cathedrals with the frescoes and the beautiful paintings, but it is the largest of the cathedrals and the northernmost. Speaking of northernmost, how about the most northerly Carnegie Library in the world? Here, money from Andrew Carnegie's fund would establish a beautiful library here of these people that is very popular for study all over the island, as is the town hall. Beautiful in the summer months when we visit. And then the rock formations there were so impressive that National Geographic, there in 2014, devoted an issue to them. They call them Scotland's master builders. The Stonehenge before there was a Stonehenge, the standing stones of Stonehenge. Now, this is one of the most visited spots in the islands. When we like to go over there, we leave from Kirkwall and go over here westward to see the three sites, the standing stones of Stonehenge, the Ring of Brodgar, and then the last one, the largest, is the Scarab Brae. And what, again, is the great mystery of why these people cut and quarried these stones and set them in certain pattern so that different times of the year, they're able to see certain things. 53 of these stones, this is larger than Stonehenge. It predates Stonehenge. But what does it mean? Well, we'll never know. These people didn't leave a written language. The Odin Stone, Odin was the chief of the Norwegian gods, the Norse gods. At a certain time, the longest day of the year, certain bit of daylight right there, where the sun really never sets through the Odin Stone. Makes for a nice photograph. How about the Ring of Brodgar? Again, the same thing. We don't know what it represents other than the spiritual center of the life of these people. Scarab Brae out on the coast is probably the most visited, and it gives the people who visit there a look at what the archaeologists found as a kind of hobbit type village. There's no trees to build your home. What you do, you build underground. And about 5,000 years ago, they did that. Greatest concentration of prehistoric sites anywhere in Europe, not just in Scotland. Archaeologists have pored over these stones since about 1986, all the way back to the 19th century, when they very first unearthed these sites. Now the tourists are there as well as the archaeologists to see the great work that these people did, even building water and sewer systems. Quite the developed and advanced society. What's so great is to be there from anywhere from around the end of September to January, February, and then again from March to about the end of April, when we see the incredible light show that takes place in the sky. No better place to see that up here than these islands because they don't have a lot of light pollution. Very, very small urban areas. So you get the aurora borealis that is most beautiful. These great stones with their sunset and the sky that it does. It just shows you why this entire area is really the off the beaten track British Isles. I hope you enjoyed that look at the unsung treasures, why they are so popular with tourists who have done maybe the traditional sites in the British Isles for more than once. You want to go to these areas to have a look at the great culture, the beautiful scenery, and the remarkable history of these treasures. Tammy, if you'd like to unmute the guests here, we're happy to take any questions that anyone might have that I might try to answer for you.
All right, so now everybody, if you can unmute yourselves for a question, or if you're in front of a desktop, just hit the space bar like you would a walkie-talkie and you can talk to Niki. So, yes.
What cruise ships go up to the islands? You mentioned that.
Yes, well, I mentioned cruising earlier too, because we're very excited. I've been at home for 15 months and I haven't been at home 15 consecutive months since 1983 when I started working on cruise ships. But a number of the lines, two of them that I work on very often are Seabourn and Silver Seas. Now these are the smaller ships. They're the luxury brand. They're the Rolls Royce of the industry. They anywhere from 250 for their smallest ships up to their largest ones, which is only about 600 people. That's why they're popular up there, because they're not the 3, 4, and 5,000. These little areas would be overwhelmed with a cruise ship that would be disembarking 3,000 or 4,000 to 5,000 people in these little areas. So the smaller ships that'll carry 300 or 400 are the ones that are most popular up there. There are some local lines that do that, but the Cunard, they're larger ones, the Celebrity, they'll do the British Isles, but they usually don't go to these smaller islands, Scilly and the Hebrides, and up into the Orkneys. Those are the ones that are most popular with the Seabourn and the Silver Sea brands.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was doing some research. How expensive is it to, or how do you, let's say, besides getting there, staying over and having a wedding there? I mean, how, is it an expensive place to travel to?
Well, Great Britain is expensive because we're trading our Yankee dollars for British pounds. And you take a beating over there, about 20 to 30 cents. Our dollar might be worth about 70 cents. So the places over there are not that expensive. If you're doing a bed and breakfast, you can make lunch out of what they give you for breakfast, but you're paying, again, in British pounds. So it's a little bit, places, you're going to Italy, to Greece, southern parts of Europe, Spain, much cheaper than you'd find. You're spending euros there. You still take a little bit of a hit when you change your dollars to euros, but not as bad a hit as you would up in the British Isles. Certainly much cheaper than what you would find in London or in Dublin or in places like Aberdeen. But there in the Hebrides and down in Scilly, there are very few that are available there. So that's why many times people will go there on a ferry boat and return the day. They don't stay over. Other times, the cruise ships, when we're going there, we're going to spend the day and we just go ashore in our little lifeboats and then come back. But there are, you know, there on St. Mary's, little Hugh-town is only about 1,000 people. There's probably not 2 hotels in the whole place. So it's not many opportunities for people who want to stay over there unless you have made reservations, and they can do that. Your travel agent can book you into a bed and breakfast or some of the larger islands up there in the Hebrides, up in Tobermory and Stornoway, where they do have hotel service. 8,000 and 10,000 people live there.
Mrs. Kavanaugh, yes.
Oh, no, I was just posing. I was just.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. How many times have you been there, Niki? Is there a certain?
I've been there about 11, I think 11 times. My last time was 3 years ago. Of course, 2019, I wasn't in the British Isles. In 2020, of course, everything shut down. So 2018 was my last visit there. I'm hoping to get back there next summer. This summer, I'm contracted out in Greece at the end of August and September to be doing the Greek Isles for Seabourn. And they've just announced that a couple of ships are going to be operating in Alaska. So they've lost so many of the places that they would normally go in the summer. There are Cunard ships, and Royal Caribbean is going to be operating up in the British Isles, but they're going to be doing just the standard British Isles cruises, London into Dublin, Waterford, and Edinburgh. They will be going to these smaller areas. But the others, are happy to see them next year. They will be full strength back in the British Isles.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm going to stop the recording. All right.
I'm going to mention with you this slide that you're seeing is what we'll be talking about in July at our next get together when we're traveling to Russia to look at St. Petersburg.
Do you want to share that? I unshared your screen.
Okay. Go back to it.
Yeah. You have three travel classes for us to take, and then we'll have that. You'll give us an exam.
Yeah, there's a look at St. Petersburg, the city that was founded by Peter the Great on a swampy marshland. 250,000 of his subjects died building this great city of his window to the west. And then it would be embellished over the years. I'm sure probably many of you have been to St. Petersburg to see the Hermitage and the Peterhof, the great palaces. The one was not enough for these guys. They had several of them. And then the beautiful Russian Orthodox churches. Look at St. Isaac's, and over here, the one on the bottom is the Church of the Savior of Spilled Blood, where one of the czars was assassinated. So we've taken a look at St. Petersburg at I think, one of the most fascinating histories of any of the capitals in Europe. It's currently not was for a time the capital of Imperial Russia.
I hope everybody can join us for that. Thank you very much. Hang on, everybody. We're going to stop the recording. Thanks for joining us, but don't hang up just yet. I just want to show you a preview of what we have the rest of the month at our camp.
Amy, thank you very much for